Sometimes one.
Behind the Castle Hill Lighthouse on America's North Atlantic coast stands the historic city of Newport, visiting place of American presidents from George Washington to John Kennedy, and the site of some of America's finest early architecture. On November 6, 1961, Newport is the first meeting place in America of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru and President John F. Kennedy. The Prime Minister's daughter, Mrs. Indira Gandhi, is warmly welcomed by President Kennedy, and Ambassador to India John Galbraith greets a familiar friend. A group of Indian students from nearby Brown University welcomes the distinguished visitors. Washington, D.C., capital of the United States. A city familiar to Prime Minister Nehru, wears the colors of autumn and a mantle of fallen leaves as it prepares to receive the Prime Minister for the third time in 12 years. President and Mrs. Kennedy escort Mr. Nehru and his daughter on the short flight from Newport to Washington aboard the presidential plane. Vice President and Mrs. Johnson, Secretary of State and Mrs. Rusk, and other high dignitaries are present to greet the Prime Minister and his daughter. The cordial atmosphere of the greeting reflects the great affection and high regard in which the American nation holds the Prime Minister and his daughter.
I wish to express, Prime Minister, on behalf of the people of the United States, our great satisfaction in welcoming you once more to our country, which you have visited in earlier days. So, Prime Minister, we welcome you here, the shores of this country, as a friend, as a great world leader, as one who has, in his own lifetimes, stood for those basic aspirations which the United States stands for today. Prime Minister, glad to see you again.
Mr. President, Ms. Kennedy, I feel deeply honored and happy being here again and to receive this great welcome from you, more particularly not for the formal side of it, but for the friendship which animated your words. You have been good enough in the past also to refer to my country in terms which evoked a warm response in our hearts. I'm grateful to you, sir, for your warm welcome, and Mrs. Kennedy also.
Following the welcoming ceremonies, the Prime Minister and the President fly by helicopter to the White House, residence of the American President. Throughout the capital city, there prevails an atmosphere of keen interest and curiosity in the Prime Minister's visit. Several meetings with President Kennedy are to be held, meetings which will permit an exchange of views and ideas between two men who will spare no effort in their pursuit of world peace. Later that evening, the Prime Minister and his daughter arrive at the White House to be greeted by President and Mrs. Kennedy, who have arranged an intimate and informal dinner, during which the two world leaders and the two Prime Minister. That afternoon, the third meeting between the two leaders takes place. Scores of reporters and photographers crowd around to hear the Prime Minister reply, "Very well indeed," when asked about the progress of the discussions. Indian Foreign Secretary M.J. Desai and Secretary of State Dean Rusk are present for the talks. Several hours later, the President and Prime Minister emerged to tell the press that the free and very frank discussions had progressed well and covered a wide range of topics, from the protection of free and independent states to the control of nuclear testing. As the Prime Minister completes his visit with President Kennedy, the nearby District of Columbia Children's Hospital is host to Mrs. Indira Gandhi. She meets young Jane Franzella, a polio victim, who is being given treatment in the modern Whirlpool tank. This visit is a very special occasion for Jane, who has created a picture of a Japanese woman to give to the distinguished visitor. The gift is warmly admired and appreciated to the joy and delight of young Jane. In another area, Mrs. Gandhi and Mrs. Rusk observed the therapy designed to improve the muscular coordination of crippled children. Later that evening at the newly decorated Indian Embassy, Ambassador and Mrs. B.K. Nehru give a reception in honor of the Prime Minister and his daughter. Distinguished visitors from the diplomatic world and old friends from the Washington community have come in large numbers to greet the visitors. The atmosphere, cordial, gay, and colorful, is a further indication of the high regard in which the nation's capital holds the Prime Minister. On the next day of the Prime Minister's visit, Mr. Nehru is guest of the National Press Club, where several hundred correspondents of the national and world press have gathered to greet and listen to one of the world's most newsworthy figures.
Mr. Chairman, members of the National Press Club, as you have been reminded, this is the third visit I have paid to this club as your guest.
Speaking of India's development, the Prime Minister said,
There is a dynamism in India today, in people's minds, in activities, in agriculture, in industry, in social services and the like. That is the main thing. And therefore, we have a good deal of faith in the future.
during the traditional question and answer period after lunch, Mr. Nehru's replies cover a wide range of topics.
First question is, the acknowledged leader of the neutralist bloc of nations, what is your opinion of the continued nuclear blasting by the USSR?
Well,
This is just one of the 3 films I uploaded today. These are all in the public domain. Great history.
In India, so I can claim to speak on behalf of India. As for the resumption of nuclear tests by the Soviet Union, I've often stated that I've thought it a very harmful, disastrous thing.
From Washington, where the two leaders established a warm relationship, the Prime Minister and his party fly to New York. A city of more than 8 million people. A city in constant change. A city of culture. A city Indian Prime Minister is greeted by a prolonged ovation as he is presented to the delegates by its president, Manji Slim of Tunisia.
It is a little over a year now since I had the honor of addressing this great assembly. In the course of this year, much has happened, and this organization, which represents the world community, has faced many crises. And among these crises has been the tragic death of the late Secretary General, Mr. Hammershall.
During his address, Prime Minister Nehru suggests that the tensions of the world might be lessened and the international atmosphere improved if the United Nations was to embark upon a world cooperation year, patterned after the International Geophysical Year, during which nations would increase cultural, scientific, and economic exchange.
Little is known or little is said about this cooperation that is going on, but a great deal is said about every point of conflict.
The Prime Minister goes on to express his opposition to nuclear testing in any form and calls for a cessation of tests under an international treaty with effective controls.
I am grateful to you, sir, for this opportunity that has been given to me to address this great assembly. And again, I would repeat that the future of the world depends so much on the continuance of the United Nations organization. Without it, perhaps that future itself would end. Thank you, sir.
Later that afternoon, hundreds of well-known New Yorkers await the Prime Minister at the residence of New York's Mayor Wagner, who presents the distinguished visitor a key to New York City. Ambassador Galbraith takes the occasion to announce on behalf of President Kennedy that a United States Educational Consortium for India is being formed to help establish a technical institute at Kanpur. Mrs. Indira Gandhi thanks her hosts for the cordial welcome. Early the following day, several thousand college students gather at New York's Commodore Hotel under the sponsorship of the Collegiate Council for the United Nations. The Prime Minister is greeted with a tumultuous ovation from the students who have waited for hours to see him. Mr. Nehru speaks of the need for enlarging the area of understanding of each other through study, through exchanges, through increased mutual interest, in order to gain the passionately sought goal of world peace. Later, the Prime Minister's unrelenting schedule takes him to Washington Square, campus of New York University, where hundreds of Indian students studying at the university wait to hear their Prime Minister. He reminds the Indian students that the knowledge and skills which they will acquire in their studies are of great value both to them and to their country. He urges them to remember their roots and to return home on completion of their education to face India's problems. The next morning, the party flies completely across the nation to Los Angeles. The Prime Minister takes the occasion to glance at some of the many books given to him during his visit. As he flies over the American continent, the flight offers the reflective Indian leader a rare opportunity to relax. Los Angeles, metropolis of the far west, third largest city in the United States, awaits the Prime Minister's arrival. Mr. Nehru soon finds a few brief hours far away from the world of reality as he enters the magic kingdom of Disneyland, a fantasy park dedicated to the ideals, the dreams, and the hard facts which have created America. A replica of an early American train conveys the Prime Minister to the American yesterday. The sights capture the imagination of the Prime Minister, whose knowledge of American history brings greater meaning to much that he sees. The popular Never Never Land has adventure in pirate ships, fantasy, and fun in teacups, and much enjoyment for all who visit this particular bit of Americana. Toward evening, the Prime Minister and his party move on to their next engagement in a metropolis that has perhaps more automobile traffic than any city in the world. Los Angeles covers a vast area, as Mr. Nero sees while he keeps his many engagements at widely separated points throughout the city. At the Beverly Hilton Hotel, the Prime Minister is the guest of the Motion Picture Association of America. Delighted stars arrive to greet the Prime Minister. But it is Mr. Nero who is the star here, as he has been throughout his visit to the United States, where for 9 days he has been seen and heard by more Americans than almost any visiting world leader in history. Next morning, Mr. Nero visits the University of California at Los Angeles. Several thousand American students, together with their fellow Indian students, gather at the university to fete Mr. Nero on his 72nd birthday. As his visit draws to a close, Prime Minister Nero casts his mind back over the events of the preceding week. He recalls his exchanges of opinion with President Kennedy and the response to his address before the General Assembly. He remembers the faces of New York University students and the many distinguished citizens who honored him and feted him throughout his visit. The moment for Mr. Nero's departure is near, but the crowds which turned out everywhere he went are still present to bid him goodbye. The American hosts express not only their admiration and respect for their departing guest, but also the friendship of the American people for him. Before leaving the United States, Mr. Nero says that his visit to America has been good for him and good for his country, and that he is sure that it will lead to a much greater understanding and cooperation between the two nations. A welcome guest departs.
This is a film record of a few moments in time. The Veterans Day ceremonies at Arlington National Cemetery on November 11, 1963. For those who were there, these moments were burned forever in their memory. In one of his last official acts on behalf of our war veterans, President John F. Kennedy placed a wreath on the tomb of the unknown. 2 weeks later, to the day, the mortal remains of President Kennedy were brought to Arlington National Cemetery to rest among those he had honored. The Tomb of the Unknowns overlooks the city of Washington. It is guarded in honor every day of the year. Every day of the year, not only on Veterans Day, people come to pay their respects, to look, to remember. But Veterans Day is special. A day to honor the dead and the living. A day of rededication. So they gather here on November 11th, the planners, the veterans, the people, as they gather in other places, millions of them, all over the nation, for military and civil ceremonies, and for prayer.
Stand back. Ladies and gentlemen, your attention, please. The President has entered the cemetery and is receiving a 21-gun salute at the present time. He will arrive at the North Walk of the amphitheater in approximately 2 minutes and proceed to the plaza to place the presidential wreath at the Tomb of the Unknowns.
What's eerie about this is that that's JFK at Arlington on the 11th of November, 1963, on Veterans Day. And 2 weeks later, to the day, he was laid to rest right there, Arlington.
Commander of the Parade of Colors, hoist the colors. The 6 Freedom Torches now being presented by representatives of the following nations: Belgium, France, Great Britain, Israel, Italy, and Mexico. This portion of the ceremonies pays tribute to all veterans here and abroad and emphasizes the desire for peace shared by the peoples of the world and the dedication of free nations to that goal. The Chairman of the Veterans Day National Committee, the Honorable John S. Gleason, Jr., the Administrator of Veterans Affairs. Mr. Administrator. Mr. President, my fellow Americans, throughout our nation and in cemeteries where fighting men are buried throughout the entire world, the living are joining together today to pay their homage to those who turned back the tides that would have destroyed freedom. But we must remember that Veterans Day is not solely a day to honor sacrifices made by our honored dead in past wars, for it is also a day to honor the living men who fought for freedom and who joined together in working for a more prosperous America and a more peaceful world. David M. Shoup, the American, and my friend, General Shoup. Mr. President, Americans and friends of Americans, these hallowed graves in this national cemetery are but mute and constant reminders that there are countless American graves throughout the world, on land and beneath the seas. All are symbolized here by the tomb of the unknowns. Our Commander-in-Chief has just placed a wreath at this tomb. By this act, he has expressed for all Americans, past and present, their deep gratitude to those who have made great sacrifices so that we can be here today physically and mentally free. Ladies and gentlemen, would you please rise while the President leaves?
For many, this is the first time they see President Kennedy in person. For most, it is the last time.
Would you be seated, please?
Dismiss us now, O Lord, with thy blessings, and accompany us ever with thy grace. Grant that what hath been said with our lips, we may believe in our hearts, and that which we believe in our hearts, we may practice in our lives, to thine everlasting glory. Amen.
But this is not the last time a presidential wreath will be laid at the tomb of the unknown, nor the last time people will pause on Veterans Day to honor, remember, and rededicate. What is guarded here goes on. It is not a stone or flesh or any substance. It is a flame in the hearts and minds of men that can never die. A flame that will burn forever.
In the throes of a rainstorm, Washington awaits the arrival of the President of India. A good omen, the rain comes as a welcome relief after 38 days of drought. Philosopher, president, an old friend coming back to visit. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan is welcomed by President John F. Kennedy.
Mr. President, I want to express a very warm welcome to you to the United States. We're glad to have you here for many reasons. First, you are the President of the largest democracy in the world, a country which is on the other side of the globe, but with which we feel bound by the closest ties of a common commitment to the independence of our country and the integrity of our individual citizens. And personally, I'm glad to welcome you here, Mr. President, because of your own kindness to Mrs. Kennedy during her journey to India. The President is a noted philosopher. When I commented on the weather this morning, he said we cannot always control events, but we can always control our attitude towards events. This is only the beginning, I'm sure, Mr. President, of a good deal of wisdom which we will derive from your visit, so that I know that I speak on behalf of all of my countrymen in welcoming the distinguished President of a great country to the shores of the United States. Mr. President.
Mr. President, I thank you for your very kind words, and I am glad to be here accepting your invitation. It gives me an opportunity to meet you, Mrs. Kennedy, the leaders of your government, and your people. Our relations with your country have been close and intimate. In the period of our struggle for independence, we had great sympathy and support from your government and people. We greet in you, Mr. President, an understanding and sympathetic friend, aware of the efforts we are making to build a liberal democracy in our country at a time when in many parts of the world the fabric of democracy is crumbling down. I hope the few days I stay here will be able to know the attitudes, objectives of our two countries a little better. Thank you very much, Mr. President, for your time today.
The columns of Arlington Memorial stand watch, like sentries frozen in timeless formation. The act of placing a wreath at the tomb of the unknown soldier keeps alive the memory of brave, nameless men. For President Radhakrishnan, the gesture recalls the Indian and American soldiers who fought and died in common purpose. Today, India and the United States are the largest democracies in the world, two countries with vastly different cultures. It is interesting that both should have chosen the most difficult form of government. Yet this fact binds both peoples and finds expression in mutual warmth and respect. Men are imperfect, but the temples they build are meant to perpetuate the ideal. These monuments are dedicated to the idea that men are created equal, endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights: life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness. The capital of the United States, a forum where freely elected citizens labor to see that these ideals are met and kept. In this historic room, the many shades of argument about foreign policy are proposed by senior senators, whose actions are the beginnings of legislation. The senators have invited President Radhakrishnan and his party to tea.
He is a man who walks with serenity amidst the alarms and excursions of our temporary problems, and it is with deep pleasure that I give you the President of India, Dr. Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan.
Another group experienced in international affairs is the Washington Press Corps, who have invited the President to dine and talk to them.
Democracy saves your soul. It preserves the integrity of your spirit. It makes you feel that the world is not worth purchase at the cost of your soul. That is why, come what may, whatever may be the consequences or cost, we are pledged to adopt a democratic way of life, and we'll carry on with that as far as possible.
This is Cape Canaveral. It is like the end of the world we know and the beginning of uncharted landscapes where trees are gigantic gantries and birds are great rockets that soar beyond the grasp of Earth. It occurred to President Radhakrishnan how instinctive a genius man has for creating incredible tools of science. He is using them to explore a universe that offers all possibilities and is terrifyingly alien. His own prosaic world is far from harmonious. Yet his mind reaches for the unknown. Man is always the restless pioneer, tracking new frontiers. The president is eyewitness to the launching of a research rocket. The Earth has become a footstool to reach for the stars and touch the moon.
That was pretty good. The rest I have is audio. I have just come upon the films, so I'll be doing them too.
From launching pads on the Florida coast
Well,
to
maybe this is still part of it.
monorails in California, we have spanned the American continent and entered an age of pure fantasy called
Yeah, it's still going.
Disneyland.
It's got another 9 minutes. I'll play these last 9 minutes and then I'll call it a night, okay?
Disneyland has become a landmark, the work of a man who has given children everywhere a universal language expressing joy and adventure. Enjoying the role of tourist, the president visits marine land of the Pacific with the spectacle of exotic communities under the sea and the performance of antique mammals. Here at MGM Studios, the president's party watches a scene being shot of a new film about the Nobel Peace Prize. Film stars are not new to President Radhakrishnan. He tells his hosts that in India, actors enjoy
I believe
special
that's
things
Elkie Summers and
elected
Paul
to my
Newman.
office. It is only a few hours from the scenic make-believe of Hollywood to the age-old Rocky Mountains in Colorado, where the United States Bureau of Reclamation is deep in research on a project of close interest to India, the development of water resources. An experiment in testing the strength of construction materials used in building dams is underway. The most urgent problem is water control. These models are the prototypes of giant dams. Ways have to be found to change the natural course of rivers, to stem the wasteful flow and harness the flood. In the last 30 years, the United States government has made great progress in controlling and conserving floodwaters. This is Bryant Dam on the San Joaquin, a river that has been, depending on nature's whim, either a pitifully thin stream or a raging torrent. But now a concrete barrier has tamed it, making it pay out slowly as the need for water arises. man-made canal runs through arid land, useless in the long, dry season. Now the soil supports a wide variety of crops: grapes, cotton, alfalfa, rice, many others. Farmers no longer look at the summer sky, waiting for clouds that never seem to materialize. Flying across America at more than 600 miles per hour, the president compares the smallness of the earth below with the vast universe above. Even the Grand Canyon is dwarfed from his lofty perspective. This is the city of New York. The canyons of Lower Broadway have witnessed the welcome of many distinguished visitors. Today, the ticker tapes and flags fly for the President of India. Up along the East River is a piece of New York that actually belongs to the world, the headquarters of the United Nations. A special meeting of the General Assembly is called to hear President Radhakrishnan speak as the head of a great nation. What he has to say is typical of all his speeches. It is precise, it is rational, it is deeply felt.
The highest concept is world community. It is that kind of world community to which we have to attach ourselves. It is unfortunate that we are still the victims of concepts which are outmoded, which are outdated, so to say. We are living in a new world, and in a new world, new type of men is necessary. And unless we are able to change our minds, to change our hearts, it will not be possible for us to survive in this world. The challenge that is open to us is it survival or annihilation?
The work of the United Nations might well start in the curricula of the world's universities. In President Radhakrishnan's words, a university must stand for the pursuit of truth and goodness. Intellectual integrity has been the fundamental principle of human life. From 3 universities on his journey, the president received honorary doctorates of laws, tokens of respect for a great teacher. In America today, there is a growing interest in Indian affairs, culture, and philosophy. Indian students studying in American universities are making their mark on the cultural life of the campus. There is time for meditation, and time for friends like the novelist Irving Stone. The literary works of Sarvepalli Radhakrishnan are well known to American writers. He has done much to make philosophy a political reality and a cultural bridge between East and West.
Remarks of the President at the 65th commencement exercise of San Diego State College from Aztec Bowl Stadium in San Diego, California, June 6, 1963. President Love, Governor Brown.
Well, that just about does it, folks. From me, I'm going to sign out. Okay? And you all have a good night.